It began as a whisper, a secret passed in hushed tones behind closed doors, where the air was thick with anticipation and fear, a rumor ricocheting through the digital corridors of power, bouncing from encrypted chat to encrypted chat. Then, in a matter of minutes, it exploded into the open, impossible to contain. At 8:02 p.m. in The Hague, a press release landed in newsroom inboxes worldwide. The International Criminal Court had issued an arrest warrant for Xi Jinping, president of China. The charge: crimes against humanity. The world's media scrambled to verify, but the document was real, its language chillingly clear. The world for a moment seemed to stop spinning. In cities across continents, traffic slowed, conversations halted, and millions stared at their screens in disbelief. On television screens from Tokyo to Toronto, the headline flashed in bold, urgent letters. News anchors struggled to keep up, their voices trembling as they relayed the unprecedented development. In Beijing, the news broke just after 2 a.m. Inside the Zhongnanhai leadership compound, the silence was shattered by the sudden flurry of activity. Senior officials were roused from sleep, summoned to emergency meetings as the gravity of the situation became clear. Phones rang with an intensity that signaled a crisis of the highest order. Every call carried a new layer of urgency, every message a new demand for answers. The Great Firewall scrambled to scrub the news, but it was too late. The story was already spreading through encrypted chats and VPNs, leaping over digital barriers as citizens shared screenshots and whispered updates. For the first time, the world's most powerful authoritarian leader was a wanted man. His image, once a symbol of unassailable authority, now bore the word "wanted" in red across global broadcasts. Across the globe, the reaction was a chaotic symphony of shock and disbelief. Newsrooms erupted into frenzied activity, and on city streets, crowds gathered around outdoor screens, trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. In Manila, journalists frantically dialed sources, their faces a mixture of exhilaration and fear. The story was personal here, and every detail mattered. In Taipei, a cautious optimism bloomed. There were no loud celebrations, only quiet smiles and hopeful glances exchanged in newsrooms and homes. In Brussels, diplomats were jolted from their routines. Emergency meetings were called. The corridors of power buzzed with speculation and urgent debate. Alliances, trade deals, and decades of foreign policy were suddenly thrown into question. The world's balance of power felt as if it was shifting beneath everyone's feet. The document from The Hague was precise. Allegations of a systematic campaign of coercion and violence in the West Philippine Sea. It was a legal bombshell, meticulously detailed and impossible to ignore. It spoke of fishermen deprived of their livelihoods, their boats left to rot on empty shores, their futures stolen by force. Coast Guard vessels used as instruments of intimidation, patrolling disputed waters with a show of overwhelming force, and an intentional policy to displace civilian populations, entire communities uprooted and sent fleeing into uncertainty. The warrant named Xi Jinping directly, citing command responsibility. For the first time, the highest echelons of power were being held to account. The court had thrown down a gauntlet, challenging not just a man, but an entire system of power. The world was watching, and nothing would ever be the same again. The shockwave of the announcement reverberated instantly across continents, catching governments, media, and citizens off guard. Within hours, the initial disbelief gave way to a divided and deeply polarized global response as nations scrambled to interpret the consequences. In Washington, D.C., the White House was caught off guard, urging restraint, but stopping short of endorsing the ICC, as officials weighed the risks and potential fallout. The U.S., not a member of the court, faced a profound dilemma: support the warrant and risk Beijing's wrath, or ignore it and abandon its commitment to international law, all while under intense scrutiny from allies and critics alike. Celebrations erupted in Manila, where fishermen and their families saw the warrant as long-awaited justice, a vindication after years of struggle in contested waters. Activist groups around the world hailed the ICC's decision as a landmark victory for international justice, hoping it would set a precedent for future accountability. But global financial markets panicked as uncertainty rippled through economies already on edge. Stock exchanges in Asia braced for a nosedive, and commodity prices fluctuated wildly, with investors fearing the escalation of trade tensions and sanctions. Corporate boardrooms from Frankfurt to New York held emergency sessions, fearing for their operations in China and the potential for sweeping retaliatory measures. Meanwhile, Moscow condemned the warrant, calling it a provocation and warning of severe consequences for international stability. Other authoritarian regimes quickly followed suit, framing the decision as a geopolitical attack orchestrated by the West, fueling nationalist sentiment at home. The world fractured along ideological lines, with the ICC's warrant now serving as the new and volatile fault line in global politics. The stage was set for a more dangerous era of great power competition, as military posturing and diplomatic standoffs intensified. The warrant became a symbol of hope for some, inspiring calls for justice and reform, while for others, it was a rallying cry against perceived foreign interference. The global order was suddenly, and perhaps permanently, upended, as alliances shifted and old certainties crumbled. The implications were immediate and staggering, with every nation forced to reconsider its place in a rapidly changing world. The world had crossed a new frontier, stepping into an era defined by uncertainty, confrontation, and the hope for a more just future. What exactly is the International Criminal Court, often known as the ICC, and why does it matter on the world stage? Based in The Hague, Netherlands, the ICC is a permanent international tribunal created to prosecute individuals for the gravest crimes: genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. It stands as a symbol of the global community's commitment to justice and accountability. The court was established in 2002, following decades of ad hoc tribunals, to end impunity for perpetrators when national courts are unable or unwilling to act. Its creation marked a turning point in international law. However, the ICC's jurisdiction is not universal. It can only investigate and prosecute crimes that occur on the territory of a member state, or are committed by nationals of those states. This means its reach is significant, but not unlimited. Unlike national courts, the ICC has no police force of its own. It relies entirely on the cooperation of member states to arrest and transfer suspects to The Hague for trial, which can be a major obstacle to justice. If a suspect remains in a non-member country, the ICC's arrest warrant is largely symbolic, as those countries are not obligated to comply. This loophole allows some accused individuals to evade justice for years. Powerful nations like the United States, Russia, and China have refused to join the ICC, citing concerns over national sovereignty and the potential for politically motivated prosecutions. Their absence limits the court's global influence. Critics often accuse the ICC of political bias or selective justice, but its stated mission is to hold even the most powerful individuals accountable for their actions, regardless of their position or nationality. The court's authority is real, but its actual power depends on the willingness of the international community to cooperate and enforce its decisions. Without this support, the ICC's impact is limited. This ongoing tension between the ideals of universal justice and the realities of national sovereignty makes the idea of an ICC warrant against a leader like Xi Jinping both plausible in theory and explosive in practice. Ultimately, the ICC is the world's court of last resort. Its reach and effectiveness depend not just on its legal mandate, but on the collective will of nations to support and uphold international justice. China's stance on the ICC is clear absolute rejection. Beijing is not a signatory to the Rome Statute and sees the court as a violation of sovereignty. Chinese diplomats argue that international law should be based on state consent, not imposed by supranational bodies. In Beijing's view, the ICC is a Western tool to undermine non-democratic systems. The legal twist: the ICC can prosecute crimes committed on a member state's territory, even if the accused is from a non-member state. The Philippines is an ICC member and the alleged crimes occurred in its exclusive economic zone. This legal gateway makes the warrant possible and dangerously provocative. China, of course, rejects this interpretation, insisting the waters are its own sovereign territory. The ICC's case would rest on a slow, grinding campaign of coercion in the West Philippine Sea. Evidence satellite imagery, maritime tracking, and harrowing testimony from Filipino fishermen driven from their traditional grounds. Fishermen would describe being chased, their nets cut, their livelihoods destroyed. The prosecution would argue these are not acts of war, but inhumane acts, part of a systematic policy to displace a civilian population. Environmental destruction from China's island building would be linked to the deprivation of local communities. The case would trace ultimate responsibility to the top Xi Jinping. The ICC targeting a sitting head of state isn't unprecedented. In 2023, the court issued a warrant for Vladimir Putin over crimes in Ukraine, despite Russia not being a member. The Philippines' own Duterte faced ICC investigation for his drug war, even after withdrawing from the Rome Statute. These cases show non-membership isn't a shield if crimes occur on a member's territory. The ICC is willing to confront powerful leaders, but enforcement is another matter. Putin and Duterte remain free, their warrants serving as diplomatic and moral condemnation. The arm of international law is long, but its grasp is often weak. Issuing a warrant is one thing, enforcing it is another. The challenge is not just legal, but deeply political. An ICC warrant would instantly shrink Xi Jinping's world. He'd be safe in China, but a fugitive in 124 ICC member states, including most of Europe, Canada, Australia, and Japan. State visits and global summits would be off-limits, isolating him from key diplomatic forums. The warrant would be a constant reminder of his status as an indicted suspect. Political rivals could use it to undermine his authority at home and abroad. China's foreign policy would suffer. Diplomacy relies on personal relationships between leaders. Without Xi at the table, China's influence would wane in global rulemaking. The warrant would force China into a more defensive, isolated posture. It would accelerate Beijing's pivot toward building a parallel system with countries that reject the ICC. The stain on Xi's legacy would be permanent. China's response would be swift and multifaceted. State media would attack the ICC as a Western puppet, rallying the public around the flag. Economic retaliation would target the Philippines and ICC supporters, sanctions, boycotts, and regulatory hurdles. Beijing would use its economic leverage to divide the international community. Militarily, tensions in the West Philippine Sea would escalate, with more aggressive tactics against Filipino vessels. The risk of accidental clashes would rise. Diplomatically, China would block UN resolutions and build a coalition against the ICC. It would offer incentives to nations willing to denounce the court. The goal: isolate the ICC and put the system of international justice on trial. The warrant, meant to promote justice, could push the region closer to conflict. Could the ICC ever arrest Xi Jinping? Realistically, no. As long as he stays in China or allied nations, he's untouchable. The ICC has no means to enforce the warrant against a nuclear-armed superpower, but the warrant's true power is symbolic, a declaration that even the most powerful can be held accountable. It shatters the aura of impunity and tells victims their suffering is recognized. The warrant would stain Xi's legacy and force the world to confront the nature of his regime. In the struggle for global justice, progress is measured in the erosion of impunity, not just arrests. The arc of the moral universe may be long, but the warrant is a bold stand for justice.